Okay, I never know when these things are going to start. So I've decided I'm just going to start talking. If you know me, you know that I'm Dennis of Man Up Life Coaching. I got this little timer here. I like to flip it to make sure I don't go too long. I'm going to go ahead and delete my. Whoa, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself there. All right. So growing old versus growing up. Now, I'm 50 years old. Um, I'm a nice, solid 50. I can run with the best of them. I'm in real good shape, and I pride myself on that. I've got good genes. I'm a Jewish Italian from the Northeast, and I can do your push-ups and your sit-ups and your pull-ups and bench and squat and deadlift and put weight in my rucksack and carry it all around. Do all that stuff. I'm physical. Truth of the matter is, I'm looking at it between now and 50, 60, 70. I see what time it is. There's necessarily going to be a slow, continued performance decline. So I'm going to do what I can while I can. That's, reasonable. But again, 50 years old, I'm a pretty freaking good looking version of 50 in terms of physical health. We age, it's what we do. Now, what I do for a living, if you are familiar with who I am and what I do, I'm a coach. I'm a coach for men. I was in education forever. I started out as an art teacher, and I eventually discovered that I could get the art part out of the way. Since really all my art education I was definitely teaching technique, how to draw, how to paint, shading, blah, blah, blah. But what was really happening is that I was attracting these students who found the drawing process therapeutic. And so through the coaching dynamic with me as their, mentor and them as the mentee, a formal relationship was established in which I was helping them to unlock their creative potential, have confidence in themselves. While they were self-judging and self-attacking, I was saying, no, 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 your drawings are great. You're a wonderful person. Validation, 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 validation. And, if I'm this Pez dispenser that's giving these young students this, sort of paternal love and validation, it's going to make you want to come back for more of that. When I talk about growing old versus growing up, I'm inspired to talk about this by, first of all, humbly, my own experience. I'm going to keep it 100% real and say that if, I'm a guy who has a business that's doing really well. But it's doing well because one client at a time, I care about my guys, and I make sure that I work with people whose problems I understand. The guys that I work well with are guys that are stuck in some way. They're stuck in their own personal evolution. The reason I'm able to help them is because I was stuck in my own personal evolution. So while on one hand, I started from the bottom, now I'm here. On the other hand, I started from the bottom, bad, bottom, yuck, 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 bad stuff. It's not interesting for me to sort of recount all of the specifics that made my life crappy. I think it is valuable to say somewhere along the way, admittedly, I was someone who demonstrated that they felt entitled to things. How do I explain this? There was a type of entitlement there by which I felt that I should get any girl I wanted. And I mean, I did well out there, but there was an entitlement. Boyfriend or not, didn't care, didn't matter. If I'm interested in you, then I should have you, because I had a really hard life and now I'm going for me and nothing's getting in my way. And if I want you, I claim you. And when you're young and attractive, of course, that confidence is, adds to your whole mystique. So I had a sense of entitlement about women. I felt that if I wanted someone, then therefore I got them. I felt that I deserved money. I felt that I deserved jobs. I felt there was just I was overcompensating for having been shit on in the first part of my life. And I sort of decided, okay, well, now I'm back with a vengeance and it's all mine. Everybody get out of my way. Claim, 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 mine, mine, mine. Admittedly, again, there's a lot of admitting going on here, but I think it's appropriate. Admittedly, there were moments along the way during which some friend or teacher or girlfriend or just really neutral observer said, "Hey, bro, I'm going to tell you how you look. Here's how you look. I'm going to be an honest mirror for you. You're kind of acting like a big baby. You're acting like a big brat. You're acting like a big fucking toddler or teenager." And toddlers and teenagers are sort of similar. I'm a dad, and I've also had the opportunity to work with both toddlers and teenagers in the educational space. Toddlers are interesting because they're learning to separate themselves as a separate entity from the mother. So the idea for them that they're suddenly autonomous because they're able to say no when the mother says yes, and they're able to make a different kind of choice. Yeah, that's terrifying. And so the way they respond, fear and aggression tend to track together. And so the way they would respond is, well, you know what a toddler looks like when they're in full-blown temper tantrum mode. And the last thing that ever occurs to anyone to do with a toddler is to recognize how terrified they are and say, "Hey, do you need a hug?" They'll say no, but if you hug them, they'll take the hug. Teenagers, I was a phenom teen art teacher. I was good at teaching teens. Nobody else wanted to work with them. A lot of the teens that I worked with were troubled. Most teens are freaking troubled, whether they show you or not. It's a rough time. I mean, it really is. Just developmentally. But I got teens. They respect emotional honesty, openness, just being real, The parents would secretly come to me and say, "My kid hates me." The teens would open up and say, "My parents hate me." And I would have to broker this relationship between the two of them and explain to both sides, look, there's a dynamic here in which both people are so worried about what the other thinks that it's becoming problematic. So parents, just give your teen a little space, let them, they're big toddlers right now. They're terrified by the idea that, well, they're learning that they're not um, they're not kids anymore. There are these adult expectations being placed on them. They're also learning again that they have the power to say no to you. And that means that once again, holy crap, I have my own unique agency aside from my parents' authority. And no matter what they tell you, I promise you that scares them. And so just like toddlers, teens need a tremendous amount of validation. You're wonderful, you're great, you're wonderful, you're the best. Teens can be so self-judging because they're having to invent their own adult persona and they don't know what that looks like. So they're just trying stuff. They're borrowing from each other. And they deal with a lot of hostility. Where does the hostility come from? It's learned in, they deal with peers who bring hostility to school from home. And it's this self-fulfilling cycle. Where are the teens learning it from? They're learning it from their, from their parents. Where does growing up happen? Growing up happens when we start becoming responsible for the choices that we make, and when we start thinking about how the choices that we make affect not only ourselves, but other people. It's when we stop thinking individualistically and when we start thinking holistically that we really truly are growing up rather than just growing old. But it's tough because, like I said, you start out as a toddler. You don't want to think of yourself as something separate from your parents. I remember being a kid and literally telling my parents, I don't want to grow up. I want to grow down. And of course, they thought it was just the cutest little thing. All these kids say the cutest little things with their stupid little mouths, right? But I mean, I meant literally, I did not want to move in the direction of adulthood because I didn't see a whole lot of promise in the way people were acting, and the quality of the interactions I had with adults wasn't the same as with kids on an emotional and intellectual presence level. But also I was aware of mortality and dying, and I didn't want my loved ones to die, nor did I want to die. A tough one to wrap my little head around. But at least in the present story of life and death and existence and matter and earth and science and this whole sort of narrative that we seem to be in right now as we have our human experience, we can take a spiritual tack and that's fine. But if we just sort of stay in the realm of being human beings on a rock in the middle of space, then yeah, there's a very practical side to accepting that things live and die. So that's one of the ways in which we grow up. We accept our own physical mortality. And acceptance does have a lot to do with growing up. So we separate as toddlers from our moms and dads. Then we sort of negotiate with them for what our experience is going to be in the world in which they have, otherwise absolute power. Then we become these teenagers, and again, we feel that there's a clock ticking and soon we're going to have to get out into the world. So on one hand, it's do what I told you to, you're my child. You're not mature enough or responsible enough to make certain decisions. But on the other hand, start packing your shit because, you can't live here forever. And so the teen starts working on, okay, what is my identity as separate from my family? Then somewhere along the way, in your 20s, you're so hormonal, and there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of physicality. There's a lot of emotions in your 30s. Typically, not everybody's on this trajectory, but typically, you're adulting and you're thinking about creating a home, settling down, thinking about securing your own shelter, becoming your own source of income and financial independence, and then thinking about scaling that so that you can become a provider. A couple of things need to happen. I'm a coach for men, so I'll just speak to guys here. I won't speak to women. I won't claim to be an authority on that life experience, but guys need to learn to be comfortable using our voices. If there's something we want to say, we have to feel comfortable saying it. We also need to learn diplomacy and learn when to use our voices. There's a now sort of famous idea out there in the self-help space that suggests that before you say anything, you should run it through a filter. Is it necessary? Is it true? And is it kind? I think the older you get, the more you realize how unnecessary most of the things we say is, and that most of the things that were blah, 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 just floating out there could have been left unsaid. Is it true? Man, are you sure it's true? Because if there's even the slightest doubt, dial it back. You don't have to say it. So make really sure. And then, is it kind? This is a tough one. As I suggested earlier in this recording, I grew up as somebody I grew up in a very hostile environment. I grew up in a very unkind environment. In fact, I grew up in a very aggressive, attacking environment, abusive environment. And so rather than kindness, what I learned was, I just learned how to eviscerate someone verbally. And I also learned how to handle business physically. And learning to say things in a way that is kind really does require effort. That's a big part of growing up. So as guys, we need to learn to use our voice. Use your voice. I think it was Ben Franklin who pretty famously said that if he lost all of his, I'm paraphrasing, but basically if he lost all of his rights except for one, he would want the freedom of speech, because with the freedom of speech, he could leverage that to get all of his other rights back. Your voice is really important. So you should use your voice. And you should learn when to use your voice, how to use your voice, when it's necessary and when it's true. How? With kindness. Other things guys want to learn along the way, part of growing up, is love is critical. That's a tough one. Oh, God damn it, is that a tough one? When you're raised a badass and you hear people talk about love, you're like, oh, shut up, you fucking jerk off with the love. You love and you love. It's supposed to be man up and you know love. Love my cock, you know. But all of that judgment and mockery and criticism and rage, it's self-attack, man. I say with authority in session after session after session, and have been saying it for years, that all judgment is self-judgment and all attack is self-attack. But on the contrary, all validation is self-validation and all love is self-love. When you love yourself, truly love yourself by forgiving yourself of anything that you judge yourself for, giving yourself breathing room, getting the monkey off your back, putting down the cat of nine tails so you're not constantly self-flagellating. When you're able to love yourself by giving yourself room to just be, then necessarily you have that to offer others as well. It's why I constantly emphasize self-validation. You're awesome. You're great. You're wonderful. You're talented. You're so handsome. You're so smart. You're so physically capable. People like you. You're a good person. You have a nice smile. You're a good guy. You're a winner. You're the best. Right? We need to hear this type of messaging. Don't go out looking for it from other people, because then when you don't get it, you're going to be angry that you're not getting it, or you'll be jealous of somebody else who is getting it. Provide your own validation. Become such an incredible source of validation for yourself and others that people want to be around you, because it feels good to be around you, because you're always saying nice stuff. You're validating, not judging. So use your voice, but use it wisely. Learn to love yourself and to redirect self-judgment in the direction of self-validation. Catch yourself judging others and redirect that as judgment, or excuse me, redirect that away from judgment and toward validation. Like, try to love everyone. It sounds so really silly, But there's wisdom to the idea of brotherly love. Well, love your brother. Love your brother as yourself. When you love your brother, you really just kind of evolve as a sentient being. You evolve because you begin to understand your function in the bigger picture. You're beginning to operate holistically. I truly believe that individuation is a virus that manifests as well as the state of separateness that causes us to treat each other as strangers instead of a state of oneness that causes us to treat each other as family. It's funny. I was recently, somebody recently, on another video that I made, I was suggesting that a guy who was really, really doing a lot of self-attacking should validate and offer himself love. And somebody made a comment, a dude made a comment that the message was passive and neutered. And it turned out to be an older guy. And so I went and I checked him out, and he has content up. Now, he's not getting a lot of views, but I went and I watched his content, and I'm like, dude's got more salt than pepper in his beard. He's talking to a camera just like I'm talking to a camera, but he's got this anger, dog. He's got this hostility. And when he saw something that said man up, he was looking for something that had an sort of a rebellious, aggro, troglodytic, knuckle dragger sort of vibe to it. Man, that's not, machismo is not manning up. There's always somebody who can kick your ass. There's always somebody with a sharper knife or a bigger gun or whatever. That's not actually this. You're misunderstanding what an alpha male is. An alpha male is a leader. And we're not going to pull this dog sled. I mean, it's a dog sled, right? You got the guy in the front, and then you got the guy behind him and the guy behind him. I mean, we're a hierarchy. I'm not going to say that we're not. But you earn your place in those ranks. Yeah, you earn it by fighting and kicking ass. No, that's not actually entirely true. If you think that, then maybe instead of just growing old, you need to also grow up, and you need to understand that we move best together when we move as a team. And there's an Italian proverb that says, love rules its kingdom without a sword. So take it from a 50-year-old who's spent the early part of his life as a raging alcoholic womanizer who cut a lot of people up and was in and out of maximum security detainment facilities, including Rikers Island, right? And Orleans Parish Prison. One of the most badass things that you can do as a man, if you're really looking to be a badass, is learn humility. Learn to love yourself. Learn to love your brother. Learn to love all creatures. Learn to make peace. learn to accept a peaceful identity and put down the hostility, put down the violence, let it go. Because that's not your strength, that's your weakness. And you're never going to understand true power until you understand that. Very simple, but very deep message. So that's what's up. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe.